Now how's that for an intro? Anyway, I want to take you back to the past of the year 2000 to 2010, where video game graphics had gotten better over 30 years after 1970s.
The Sega Dreamcast came out in 1999, just a year before that whole Y2K stuff nobody mentions about nowadays.
I got my PlayStation 2 before I even got the PlayStation 3 for Christmas, I think in 2008 or 9.
The Xbox was a big rage back then due to the high-definition graphics in video games.
I'm gonna be honest, I never owned a GameCube console, except for the Wii years later down the road in 2007. Now that plays GameCube and Wii games all together. These are the consoles I remember seeing in the year 2000s, right before the PS3, the Xbox 360, and the Wii. However, there was a console that tried to revolutionize back in the year 2006, only to be overshadowed a year later. The Hyperscan.
Tom likes collector card games, and Jim likes video games. To make a truly great game, I was thinking you could combine them. Eh? I meant combine the games, not the kids!
The new Hyperscan video game system is here, featuring X-Men. It's where collectible card games meet video games. Scan your character, battle and gain power, rescan to save the power permanently back to your card. Hyperscan video game system with one controller and X-Men game pack. Other games coming soon, sold separately, rated E10 plus to teen. Hyperscangamer.com.
The Hyperscan is a video game console that tried to revolutionize the use of the trading cards in order to interact with the games that comes with it. But it's also one of the biggest commercial failures that got overshadowed in 2006, primarily due to the 2D graphics and how the console is cheaply made. I remember seeing this commercial as a kid, but it faded into obscurity mainly due to the Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3 that was new at the horizon, and also the Nintendo Wii. The Hyperscan is only sold in Toys R Us, which I don't know if it's either sold in Walmart or Target several years ago. The only thing that I do remember is just Toys R Us just promoting this. Before we go into the history and reviewing the Hyperscan, I want to point out two important things. Number one, I never even owned the Hyperscan. The only thing that I ever own is the PlayStation 2, and later on the PlayStation 3, the Wii, and still own the N64 back in the days before I even heard about the Hyperscan. And number two, the Hyperscan only has 5 games with their own trading cards, making it the shortest library of video games, much in the comparison to the Virtual Boy something odd years ago. And looking at the console and the controllers, it looks as though it's cheaply made. Reminds me of the Amiga CD32's controllers.
Since we all give the rundown about the Hyperscan, let's talk about the company manufacturer that made the Hyperscan. Mattel is an American multinational toy manufacturing and entertainment company that started in Los Angeles in January 1945 and headquartered in El Segundo, California. Mattel has a presence in 35 countries and territories. Its products are sold in more than 150 countries worldwide. Those may or may not know who Mattel is. They're the ones who made Barbie dolls, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe toys, Hot Wheels and many other toy brands that are made by Mattel. Some of you are already wondering, what has Mattel got to do with the Hyperscan, I hear you asked?
I believe I can answer that.
When it comes to space games, nobody compares to Atari.
Excuse me, have you compared them to Intellivision?
Intellivision?
Sure, they've got great space games, like Intellivision Space Battle.
I didn't know.
And now there's Space Armada and the incredible Astro Smash.
I didn't know.
Here, compare for yourself. Intellivision Space Games from Mattel Electronics. Once you compare, you'll know.
After the release of the Atari 2600 in 1977, Mattel wanted to dip their hands in the video game market by releasing the Intellivision in 1979. The graphics were 5 times better, and the controls have way more buttons than just your joystick and button. But that's not all. The Intellivision has an accessory called the IntelliVoice Voice Synthesis Module. From what I can understand, this is the very first console with this accessory being the only first video game console that has a digitized voice. Although I doubt it, in my honest opinion, that there may be others that are like this far earlier than the Intellivision. There's also the ColecoVision, but that's a different topic for another time. After the video game crash of 1983, Nintendo and Sega releasing their own consoles in 1985 and 86, which changed the landscape of the video game industry, Mattel decided to just dip their hands yet again into the video game market, but making an accessory for the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Power Glove.
The Power Glove for your Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you and the games are one. The Power Glove. Everything else is child's play.
It was pretty innovative back in the 80s, up until the Wii just blew this out of the water in 2007. Now this next bit is gonna be complicated, because it has the involvement of Nintendo and Mattel. I did some digging, and the reasons why these companies are involved is to sell the Nintendo Entertainment System in UK, Europe, and Canada. And that is where Mattel comes in as a UK, European, and Canadian distributor. Only there's 3 problems. 4th one to be exact, but I'll get there in just a minute. Larry Bundy Jr. explained about the 3 problems that the NES is sold in the UK. I'll put this link down below for further information. The first problem is that it is impossible to get a Nintendo Entertainment System in various other stores. Such places like Woolworths and Dixon's, plus including Montgomery, which I'm not sure if that's a thing. No, instead, they have it in most obscure places, including family-owned indie department stores. Secondly, the pricing is stupidly insane. The NES game is cost about £70 per game. That's like the half price of the Nintendo Entertainment System that costs upward to $200. All the other prices, such as like the Sega Master System for £25, and the computer system, £1.99. Even if you did get your hands on a Nintendo game, it leads to 3rd problem, that there's 2 versions of the Nintendo Entertainment System. The Nintendo Entertainment System version and the Mattel version. Now, why is there 2 versions of the Nintendo Entertainment System, I hear you ask? Because Nintendo saw what Mattel was doing, that they weren't too pleased about it, so instead they pulled the licensing from Mattel and started selling their own. And as for the 4th problem, well, I do have the commercial in hand. Let's see if we can figure out what the problem is.
We are Nintendo. We cannot be beaten. Oh yeah? Bet. Oh yes, yes. No. Wait, I'll get it again. Feature! Feature! We are Nintendo. We do not like losing. We do not like losing.
Nintendo, it can't be beaten for real family entertainment.
The graphics and its sound system is a bit slow. Now, I'm not even sure if this is true or not, considering I never own a Mattel version of the Nintendo Entertainment System. In fact, it is impossible to get one, considering of how it's being sold in various other obscure places. But having a system that runs a bit slow without Nintendo's knowledge is just a bit insulting. That's just my speculations talking. 17 years later, after the release of the Power Glove, we come to the Hyperscan. I've already seen the angry video game nerd, Shane from Re-Res, talked about it in great length of how the Hyperscan is poorly designed, especially in 2D graphics and not so much as 3D graphics. In fact, this looks like a plug-and-play system and not an actual game console. And given how cheaply designed the Hyperscan is made, it looks as though this is a bootleg system, given how the AV cables are wired in and not so much as like disconnected. There's also the USB output, which I never seen in the commercial being used. Just to take an educated guess here, I think this is supposed to connect to another Hyperscan. Much similar to the Virtual Boy that has the link cable system in order to connect to another Virtual Boy for 2 players only. But sadly, the Virtual Boy had bitten the dust before that even happened. But for the Hyperscan, I would assume there's a game that has a 4-player option by using the link cable to another Hyperscan, but of course it never went anywhere, and this console alone had bit the dust much similar to the Virtual Boy. I mean, it's a theory, yet I cannot imagine what game would require 4 players if this, of course, was implemented. Aside from the USB port shenanigans, let's talk about the face shielding. Right off the bat, the controller imports are clusterfucking around the power button, which is another bad design. What if someone else wanted to replace a controller and they somehow accidentally hit the power button faster than you can say, oops? And as for the controller import, that's a keyboard and mouse import that is made in 1987. This became obsolete when the USB ports were pretty much changing the keyboard and mouse and pretty much everything in today's standards. So why the fuck is it here? I would assume just to avoid any other imports much similar to either the GameCube, Xbox, or PlayStation 2 imports, I would imagine. Yet there's a USB import they could have just used and used a Logitech controller and just call it a day. But no, they had to be fancy with this one, which is the dumbest decision I have ever seen in my entire life. Making it even more reasons why this is cheaply made to begin with.
So let's talk about the style and design of the Hyperscan. What my colleague said, it looks cheaply made. Like they slapped it together in just 1 month and called it good for production. This clam-shaped console folds like a little CD booklet for easy transport. But the problem is the hinges are made of cheap plastic in closer observation. But the biggest problem is mainly down to the cards you need in order to unlock key features that the game's provided. I'll explain it more in depth going through 5 games in its library. The color scheme of the Hyperscan with its black and red trim similar to the Atari Jaguar. Another failed console that looks like a toilet. We definitely need to talk about that one at some point.
Oh, I agree with you. It's just we got a much bigger fish to fry, such as its video games that comes with the Hyperscan. In this single image, there's only 5 games, including X-Men that came packaged with the Hyperscan. It's worth interesting to note that the Hyperscan can easily be broken under 3 certain things. It could easily be broken due to the RFID scanner is being secured by its cheaply made plastic hinge. It could easily be broken due to the AV cables are being soldered onto the machine itself, that one tug or one pull from it could break the video connection. Unless you have the tech know-how to connect those soldering points back in place, it is completely, of course, rendering it useless. Thirdly and finally, it could easily be broken mainly due to the disk hard drive system. Now, I'm not completely sure if it's either due to the motor mechanism or the direct current that is feeding into the machine. My only best guess is that it's mainly due to the console and its top hatch that is poorly designed, preventing the game from not running properly. Now, I'm not sure if that's true or not, considering of how the Hyperscan is being poorly designed and cheaply made, to the point where it's just gonna fail at 3 different things.
The first game on the chopping block is X-Men on the Hyperscan. After what looks like 2 minutes of loading, we see a company logo name, Semi-Logic Entertainment, an American multinational video game developer, distributor and licenser that headquartered at Minneapolis, Minnesota. The company in question is known for developing Little Girls Adventures, for porting Greenie Fatum cards for pretty much every system. What exactly is their involvement with the Hyperscan, I hear you ask? Well, for some odd reasons, they got the licensing of both Marvel and Cartoon Network in making 4 games for the Hyperscan. There's also a 5th game in development by Semi-Logic, but it was abandoned after the Hyperscan was killed off by Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 with their 3D graphics. But we'll discuss about that later. So here it is, X-Men on Hyperscan. X-Men is a fighting game that requires you to scan a character card and a mod card for the game to start. Already this is a dumb decision that is programmed by the developers. In Mortal Kombat X, you have a selection of characters for you to select along with 3 fighting styles with their own brutalities. But the Hyperscan threw that away, instead have to scan a character and a mod card for you to start the game. This is just a clunky mess, and the controls looks a bit delayed on the input when fighting or training mode on X-Men. and the fatalities they've broken it to shit by making you scan the card when doing a finishing move. Looking back at Mortal Kombat X, it doesn't pull that shit when fucking up your opponents on either X-ray or finisher moves. But for this sorry excuse pass, it's horrible. After fighting your opponents, you have to save it on the character card you scan. It acts like a memory card, which is a cool idea, but subdue to the cards, you have to scan constantly in order to select, play, and save the game. So, on to the next one.
Next game on the list is...
Greetings and salutations, everyone! I'm Idaho Jones, ringmaster and commentator for the Interstellar Wrestling League!
which is another fighting game, but it kinda reminds me of Clay Fighter on both the Super Nintendo and the N64. I mean, it's not terribly bad, but it's so fucking weird. And like X-Men before, you still have to constantly use the cards in order to scan them, either by special moves or just saving the character card. Not much to discuss about it, so moving on.
Before going forward on the last 3 games, we needed to go over what are good beat-em-up arcade games before diving into the shitty, somewhat beat-em-ups.
There are good beat-em-up games such as like Metamorphic Force, Ultra Beast, Battle Circuit, Violent Storm, and many others afterwards. Now tell me, out of every single last good beat-em-up games, why does Semi-Logic had to make 3 shitty beat-em-up games such as like Marvel Heroes, Marvel Spider-Man, and Ben 10? All, mind you, on the Hyperscan. The first beat-em-up on the list is Marvel Heroes, and wait a minute, I almost forgot. The IntelliCards are very important to collect because you need them to unlock sections or parts of the game in order to play. Unlike the fighting game where you had to like scan characters and mods in order to actually play a fighting game, which is just stupid in my honest opinion. But there is also the biggest flaw in that whole design. In order to play as any other characters from the X-Men, you would have to go out and buy yourself a pack of IntelliCards. Hell, there's even a checkbox list that just shows how many characters there is and how many mods there are. Like, I can't imagine someone just go out of their ways of just buying pack after pack after pack in order to create themselves a full set in order to play X-Men for the Hyperscan. But for this sorry excuse piece of shit, I'm gonna have to let Shane explain about this.
Unlike X-Men, this isn't a fighting game, but instead it's a platformer side-scroller beat-em-up. The cards are used in a totally different way here, but somehow it's worse than the X-Men game. Look, you can get Wolverine in X-Men and play through his whole campaign. All you need is his character card. But in Marvel Heroes, you might have a character card for the Hulk, but you may not have his story card. They look exactly alike, but they don't work the same way. Here is how that works. If you've got a story card, congratulations! You can play whatever that story is. You play as a character dictated by the story. Typically, it's 3 boring levels with mindless enemies being tossed at you with 2 smaller bosses until you beat a main boss. Boring. If you don't have a story card, though, you can still play the game by making your own story! Kinda. Get out your pack of paid DLC nubbins, choose a character, pick an area, use an atmosphere, throw in some villains or bosses, and there you go. Your own custom content.
So wait a minute, you have to have a story card, which bypass 90% of the bullshit, just so you can play the game.
In a way, yes.
You got to be fucking kidding.
Hey man, I wish I was making jokes, but really, that's the whole point. Like, seriously, I cannot imagine someone else going out of their ways of just buying themselves a pack after pack after pack, just so that way they could just customize their own stories without even using the story card. Is just absolute bullshit. I'm starting to think that Semi-Logic had misconceptualized the ideas of using the cards, but instead heavily abusing them as a huge selection. Or it could be Mattel, who has a lot of experience in the video game industry, just fucked them in the game design by having the cards as a massive selection and nothing else. It's kind of like how they fucked with Nintendo on distributing it in UK, Europe, and Canada.
But honestly, it's that whole random stage creation thing that is inexcusable. We used an area card with the Thing from Fantastic Four, and we were instantly loaded into a level that was broken! I tried for half an hour to find some solution to get past this hole in the ground, but absolutely nothing I tried worked. Nothing! There seemed to be no way at all to beat this stage. Soulless and broken random mission generators are one thing, but when you're charging for the cards that make this random system work, when it really doesn't, that's when you're ripping people off.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me considering how broken this game is made to begin with. Let's move on to another game, Spider-Man on Hyperscan.
We see Spider-Man swinging from whatever void he came from, and we're taken to the selection level. Spider-Man on the Hyperscan is only a Toys R Us exclusive and not sold in Target or Walmart. And like before, the trading cards are a must-have in order to unlock sections and parts of the game in order to play Spider-Man on the Hyperscan. It's not so much as the power-ups in general, but more of the levels that you need to unlock.
There are a variety of stages to choose from, but you can't play all of them because most of these levels are physically locked behind cards, meaning you'll need to go out and buy a bunch of booster packs to find them to play the whole game.
That's right. You would have to buy more booster packs in order to unlock the levels in order to actually play the game. That is bullshit. Hell, just give me Spider-Man Arcade any day, and it kicks much ass than the one that is on the Hyperscan.
I totally agree with you 100%, sir. And while we're at it, give us the Avengers Arcade. I play that all day, the Marvel heroes on Hyperscan, than it has to offer.
And this is the reasons why there are much better beat-em-up games than the ones on the Hyperscan. But Spider-Man on the Hyperscan is really not worth it.
Last game is Ben 10 on the Hyperscan. As we said before, this is the last and final game before Mattel pulled the plug on the Hyperscan. The reasons being is that there are better graphics out there like Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3, and the Nintendo Wii. It's another beat-em-up, and it sucks even worse than any beat-em-ups on Hyperscan. Too many instructions that stops the game randomly, and the cards are a fucking joke to play any of the aliens. I'll let Shane explain this part.
This is one licensed property that in theory should be a perfect fit for the Hyperscan. The original TV series is about a boy who has the ability to morph into aliens. So you'd think while you're playing the game, you just pull out an alien card and scan it to turn into whatever is on the card. It's a simple idea, and I think anyone could get behind it. Heck, even I think it sounds pretty interesting. Then can turn into fun aliens and players can collect the alien cards. But that's not what they did. They somehow made it more complex. Not only are there alien cards, but there are also project mods, attack mods, defense mods, speed mods, power mods, villain defense, help, and ultimate cards. Are you kidding me? Why did you need so many? They somehow found a way to make it so frustrating and confusing to know what cards do what at any given moment that you don't want to bother using any of them at all.
I want to know exactly what kind of fucking game requires that many fucking cards just to play the damn fucking game. And I know I said a lot of profanity, but what fucking masochists would require that many cards just to play this? They have what appears to be a great opportunity and they just made it so fucking complicated as shit as possible. Overall, the gameplay is a turd sandwich that's been thrown in the sewer and we need to flush this abomination.
But before we do our closing of this episode, there are two unreleased games for the Hyperscan we needed to talk about: Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Nick Extreme Sports. We do apologise if we don't have the image for the 7th and final game, but we do have informations regarding to that game. Anyone who watched the Avatar series knows the plot. The four nations of air, water, earth, and fire lived in harmony until the Fire Nation declared war. A century later, there is still no end in sight to the destruction. Then, an avatar named Ong, who is the last airbender, discovers that he has the power to control the four elements. He joins forces with Katara, a waterbender, and her brother Sokka to restore balance and harmony to their world.
Records indicated that this was almost fully completed until the Hyperscan was discontinued. There are 4 different packs that comes along with it for a different change, such as the Air series, Water, Earth, and Fire series. My only best educated guess is that this is going to be another shitty beat-em-up game or another fighting game, unlike the other two. Yet the strange thing about it is that there's no mention about the character cards other than just the bending elements. Yet I cannot imagine how this would have played out if this does exist. And as for Nick Extreme Sports, this is the last game to be announced on the Hyperscan. This was going to be based on the multiple hit Nickelodeon franchises, but it was scrapped due to the declining of the Hyperscan in its sell figures. But it also bugs me how Semi-Logic has the licensing over Nickelodeon games, much like Marvel and Cartoon Network. Now how the hell did they manage to get a license partnership with Nickelodeon, I have no clue. I would assume it has something to do with Mattel, given the history and its track records of not only making video games, but also toys back in the day. Either way, the Hyperscan is the biggest commercial failure in video game history, but it also serves as an example of something that could be improved without the heavy usage of the cards. On top of that, better 3D graphics.
And it's time to say goodbye to all of you. But I'll be seeing you again very soon. Goodbye.
I wanted to give a quick word before closing this episode. One is that I'm still going to make videos, and two, I'm still going to make documentaries, just had to change diversity of different other topics of documentaries. There will be 2 separate playlists of both the video game documentaries and documentaries, which I'll be planning on in the future. So, thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you very soon. Goodbye.